What if I told you that your current life crisis, the depression, the anxiety, the feeling that everything is falling apart, isn't a sign that you're broken? What if your psyche forces you to become the person you were always meant to be? Carl Jung discovered something that will completely revolutionize how you see your struggles. Every psychological crisis is individuation. Your unconscious mind is trying to push you toward wholeness, but you're fighting it because you don't understand what's happening. I will show Jung's individuation process, the psychological journey that transforms your deepest conflicts into your greatest strengths and your worst breakdowns into your most profound breakthroughs. Carl Jung didn't discover individuation in a textbook. He found it by living through one of the most intense psychological breakdowns in recorded history. In 1913, at age 38, Jung was successful, respected, and seemingly had everything together. Then, his world imploded. His relationship with Freud ended catastrophically. His professional reputation crumbled, and he began experiencing what he called his confrontation with the unconscious. For 6 years, Jung descended into psychological chaos. He heard voices, saw visions, and felt like he was losing his mind. But here's what makes Jung's story extraordinary. Instead of seeing this crisis as pathology, he recognized it as a developmental necessity. He realized that his first 38 years had been spent building a successful persona: the brilliant psychiatrist, the dutiful son, the respected colleague. But this persona, while necessary for external success, had become a prison that cut him off from his authentic self. Jung's breakdown was his psyche's attempt to force integration. All the aspects of himself he had rejected, his creativity, his spirituality, his emotional depth, his unconventional ideas, were demanding to be acknowledged and integrated into his conscious personality. This experience led Jung to understand that what we call a mental breakdown is often actually a psychological breakthrough. The psyche's attempt to reorganize itself into a more complete, authentic whole. He called this process individuation, the journey from who you think you should be to who you are. Jung's crisis became the foundation for one of psychology's most profound insights. Psychological suffering isn't random. It's purposeful. It's your unconscious mind's way of guiding you toward wholeness. The individuation process, from fragmentation to wholeness. Understanding the pre-individuation state. Before individuation begins, most people live what Jung called a provisional life, based on external expectations rather than authentic self-expression. You develop what Jung called a persona, a social mask that helps you fit in and succeed, but gradually becomes a prison. The persona prison. Your persona is necessary for navigating society, but problems arise when you mistake it for your true self. The successful executive who can't access their creativity, the people pleaser who can't express anger, the rational person who denies their emotions, all are trapped in persona identification. The shadow accumulation. As you develop your persona, you necessarily reject aspects of yourself that don't fit the image. These rejected parts don't disappear. They accumulate in what Jung called the shadow. The shadow contains negative traits, and often your most significant unrealized potential. The unconscious compensation. Jung discovered that the unconscious always compensates for conscious one-sidedness. If you're overly rational, your unconscious produces emotional content. If you're overly controlled, it creates chaos. If you're excessively nice, it generates aggressive impulses. This compensation creates internal tension that eventually becomes unbearable. triggering what Jung called the individuation crisis. The 3 stages of individuation. Jung identified 3 primary stages in the individuation process, each involving integrating different aspects of the psyche. Stage 1, shadow integration, meeting your dark side. The first stage involves confronting and integrating your shadow, all the aspects of yourself you've rejected or denied. This is often the most difficult stage because it requires acknowledging parts of yourself that contradict your self-image. The shadow encounter. Shadow integration often begins with projection. You find yourself strongly triggered by certain people who embody qualities you've rejected in yourself. The person who irritates you most often represents your own disowned shadow. The integration process. Instead of continuing to project these qualities onto others, individuation requires you to recognize them as aspects of yourself. This doesn't mean acting out destructively, but consciously acknowledging and integrating these energies. For example, if you've always seen yourself as the nice person, you might need to integrate your capacity for healthy selfishness and assertiveness. If you've identified as the rational person, you might need to embrace your emotional and intuitive sides. Stage 2, Anima-Animus integration, balancing inner opposites. The second stage involves integrating what Jung called your personality's contrasexual aspects. For men, this means integrating the anima, inner feminine. For women, it means integrating the animus, inner masculine. Beyond gender stereotypes. This isn't about gender roles, but psychological balance. The anima represents receptivity, intuition, emotional depth, and connection. The animus represents assertiveness, logic, independence, and goal orientation. The integration challenge. Most people overdevelop one side while neglecting the other. Men might overdevelop assertiveness while neglecting emotional intelligence. Women might overdevelop nurturing while neglecting personal ambition. Individuation requires developing both sides. The relationship mirror. Anima-Animus integration often happens through relationships. You're attracted to people who embody the qualities you need to develop in yourself. The goal isn't to find someone to complete you, but to become yourself. Stage 3, self-realization, encountering your true center. The final stage involves connecting with what Jung called the self, the organizing center of your personality that transcends ego identification. This is the stage where you move from ego-driven living to self-directed living. The self versus the ego. The ego is your conscious sense of I, necessary but limited. The self is your deeper organizing principle that includes both conscious and unconscious aspects. When you connect with the self, you gain access to wisdom, creativity, and purpose that transcends personal limitations. Transcendent function. Jung discovered that when you consciously hold the tension between opposing aspects of yourself, something new emerges, what he called the transcendent function. This is your psyche's creative capacity to generate new solutions that honor both sides of internal conflicts. How conflicts lead to integration. Jung realized that psychological conflicts aren't problems to be solved. They're tensions to be held consciously until they transform into something new. The tension-holding process. Recognition. Identify the internal conflict. What 2 aspects of yourself are in tension? Conscious suffering. Instead of immediately resolving the tension, hold it consciously. Feel the discomfort of not knowing the answer. Active imagination. Engage with both sides of the conflict through dialogue, visualization, or creative expression. Transcendent solution. Allow a new perspective to emerge that honors both sides of the conflict. For example, suppose you're torn between security and adventure instead of choosing one. In that case, you might discover a way to create security that includes adventure or adventure that doesn't threaten your essential security. The crisis as individuation catalyst. Why crisis is necessary for growth. Jung understood that individuation rarely happens voluntarily. Most people are too comfortable with their familiar patterns to undertake the difficult work of psychological integration. Crisis forces what comfort never could. The breakdown-breakthrough cycle. What we call breakdown is often the psyche's way of breaking down outdated structures to make room for new growth. The midlife crisis, the quarter-life crisis, the spiritual emergency, all are individuation crises in disguise. The compensatory crisis. When you live one-sidedly for too long, your unconscious creates a crisis that forces balance. The workaholic gets sick and is forced to slow down. People-pleasers face situations where they must choose themselves over others. The control freak encounters circumstances beyond their control. The meaning-making crisis. Jung observed that many psychological crises are meaning crises. When your current life structure no longer provides meaning, your psyche creates a crisis to force you to find a deeper purpose. Recognizing individuation crises. Not all crises are individuation crises, but individuation crises have specific characteristics. Existential questioning. You ask fundamental questions about identity, purpose, and meaning. Who am I? What's the point of all this? Is this really what I want from life? Persona breakdown. The social masks that used to work no longer feel authentic. You can't maintain the performance anymore. Shadow eruption. Aspects of yourself you've long suppressed begin demanding attention. You might have thoughts, feelings, or desires that seem entirely out of character. Relationship upheaval. Your relationships begin reflecting your internal conflicts. You might find yourself attracted to people who embody qualities you need to develop or repelled by people who represent aspects of yourself you're rejecting. Creative urgency. You feel compelled to express yourself in new ways, through art, writing, music, or other creative outlets. This is your authentic self trying to emerge. Modern individuation crises. The quarter-life crisis. This often occurs when young adults realize their path, career, relationships, lifestyle, is based on others' expectations rather than their authentic desires. The midlife transition typically happens when people have achieved external success but feel empty inside. The persona that served them in the first half of life becomes a limitation in the second half. The empty nest crisis. Parents whose identity was built around caregiving must rediscover who they are beyond their parental role. The success crisis. High achievers who reach their goals only to discover that external achievement doesn't provide lasting fulfillment. The spiritual emergency. People who have lived primarily from a rational, materialistic worldview suddenly encounter spiritual or transcendent experiences that don't fit their previous framework. Supporting your individuation journey. Practical individuation techniques. Active imagination. Jung's most powerful technique for individuation involves consciously dialoguing with unconscious contents. The process. Find a quiet space and enter a relaxed state. Allow an image, figure, or symbol to emerge from your unconscious. Engage this image in dialogue, asking what it wants or represents. Listen without judgment to whatever emerges. Continue the conversation until you gain insight or understanding. Dream work. Dreams are the royal road to individuation. They often present you with shadow figures, anima, animus images, and self-symbols. Dream integration practice. Keep a dream journal and record dreams immediately upon waking. Look for recurring figures, themes, or symbols. Dialogue with dream figures through active imagination. Ask what each dream element might represent about your current individuation process. Creative expression. Individuation often requires moving beyond purely rational approaches to include innovative and symbolic expression. Creative practices. Art therapy. Draw, paint, or sculpt images that emerge from your unconscious. Writing. Journal about your inner experiences or write stories that express your psychological themes. Movement. Dance or move in ways that express different aspects of your personality. Music. Create or listen to music that resonates with your individuation process. Shadow work exercises. Projection. Reclamation. Identify people who trigger strong reactions in you. Ask, how might I possess the qualities I see in them? Practice owning these qualities consciously rather than projecting them. Opposite day. For one day, consciously express qualities opposite to your usual persona. If you're always agreeable, practice disagreeing. If you're always serious, practice being playful. Letter to your shadow. Write a letter to the aspects of yourself you've rejected. Ask what they want, what they need, and how they might serve your growth if integrated consciously. Creating supportive conditions for individuation. Solitude and reflection. Individuation requires regular time alone for self-reflection. Create daily practices that allow you to connect with your inner world. Psychological safety. Find or create relationships to explore all aspects of yourself without judgment. This might be through therapy, support groups, or trusted friends. Meaning-making practices. Engage in activities that help you connect with purpose and meaning beyond ego gratification. This might include service to others, spiritual practices, or creative expression. Patience with the process. Individuation is a lifelong journey, not a destination. Practice patience as you navigate the inevitable ups and downs of psychological growth. Your individuation challenge. Here's your practical framework for beginning or deepening your individuation journey. Week 1. Recognition and assessment. Identify areas where you feel inauthentic or constrained. Notice what triggers strong reactions in you, potential shadow projections. Begin a dream journal and record any significant dreams. Ask yourself, what aspects of myself have I rejected or hidden? Week 2. Shadow exploration. Practice the projection reclamation exercise with one person who triggers you. Try the opposite day exercise in a small, safe way. Write a letter to an aspect of yourself you've rejected. Notice what happens when you consciously acknowledge previously denied parts of yourself. Week 3. Creative expression. Engage in one form of creative expression that feels authentic to you. Practice active imagination with any images or figures that emerge. Pay attention to what wants to be expressed through you. Allow yourself to create without judgment or expectation. Week 4. Integration and planning. Reflect on what you've discovered about yourself during this process. Identify one way you can live more authentically in your daily life. Create a plan for continued individuation work. Consider what support you need for this ongoing journey. Remember Jung's profound insight. The privilege of a lifetime is to become who you truly are. Your current crisis isn't evidence that something is wrong with you. It's evidence that something is trying to become right. Your psyche is attempting to guide you toward wholeness, but requires your conscious participation. The goal of individuation isn't to become perfect, but to become complete. It's not about eliminating your problems, but integrating them into a larger, more authentic sense of self. When you stop fighting your psychological conflicts and start working with them, they become the raw material for your most significant growth. Your individuation journey is unique, but the process follows universal patterns. Trust that your psyche knows what it's doing, even when the path seems unclear. Every crisis contains the seeds of your next level of development. If this video helped you understand your life crisis as an individuation opportunity, hit that like button and subscribe for more insights that bridge ancient wisdom with modern psychology. Next week, we're exploring how to build anti-fragility through philosophical practices, turning life's challenges into sources of unshakable strength. Comment below and tell me, what aspect of yourself is trying to emerge through your current challenges? I read every comment and often feature the most insightful responses in future videos. Remember, the privilege of a lifetime is to become who you truly are. Your crisis isn't your enemy. It's your psyche guiding you home to yourself. Are you ready to embrace the journey?